am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and welcome to night 3 of the ChemKnits Chanukah special, the 2024 ChemKnits Chanukah special. Every night of Chanukah this year, there'll be a new yarn dyeing video that corresponds to a mini skein I sent out in yarn samplers that are wrapped up, so that way you can treat yourself with a new colorway every night of Chanukah. And there may still be some more samplers left in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. There'll be links in the description. Tonight, I want to play around with resist dyeing. Now, resist dyeing is a technique where you somehow twist or tie your yarn to limit the ability of dye to access part of that yarn. It'll leave you some of the original color left that then you can over dye or leave as is, depending on what you want to do. Tonight, I plan on using reusable nylon zip ties as my resists, as this is my personal favorite yarn resist technique that I'm really excited to go and show you the colors we have planned for tonight. So let's go start mixing up some dyes so we can create our background color. I put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves to start making some stock solutions of Dharma Acid Dye's Oxblood Red and Pecan Brown, because I want to use these together to make the maroon base for our project. There is a color Cabernet, which is a lot of fun, but it can sometimes be harder to rinse out. And so I thought that I should try to make my own version of the color with two colors that I know work pretty well. Plus, in a video that hasn't come out yet, I did mix Oxblood and Pecan Brown together. And I mean, granted with some other colors, but it made a really beautiful fall colored red. And so I thought that I would go that way, at least starting, and then if I need to add another color in there, I can, to get the color that I want. I did a lot of back and forth over how much dye I should create, how much dye stock I need, because I both don't want that much, because I don't want a ton of leftovers, but I'm going to be dyeing at least 1,600 grams of yarn, and say I want to do at least a 1% depth of shade, I should do a full liter dye stock of each color, which means that I measured out 10 grams of dye, which you've already seen me do that now, and dissolved it with some boiling water in my glass jars, and then eventually bringing that total volume up to 1 liter. This way I should have plenty, and if I need to mix more, I can mix more, but it means that I'm mixing less to start with. There are a lot of times where I would decide to measure out the dyes and dissolve them directly for a project like this, but since I don't know right away the proportions of red to brown that I want, and I want to be able to modify that as I'm mixing the dyes together, it makes more sense to make the stock solutions of both colors. And just cross my fingers that I'm not going to want 6 parts red, 1 part brown, or way unequal like that. Tonight, we're going to be dyeing a lot of yarn that is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. We'll be dyeing 10 gram mini skeins in platinum sock and platinum DK from Wool to Dye For, and some full 100 gram skeins of Knit Pick Stroll fingering weight yarn. I pre-soaked all of the yarn overnight in some plain tap water with no acid added to the pre-soak. For the resist stage, I think we're going to dye 400 grams of yarn all at once in a catering steam pan. But we need to add our resist. And I'm going to be using some older zip ties that are very pigmented and could leave some color behind, because I think that that just makes sense today, unfortunately. Now, as for our resists, I'm going to keep it pretty simple, and I'm going to cover up, I think I'm going to do 2 in each area. The one thing with mini skeins is that they can really shift their location a bit, and so the yarn that's in the center down here may not be the same yarn that's in the center over here. I'm not worrying about trying to get things super evenly spaced, but what I want is enough movement in here so that way we can get color all the way through over there. But I'm double zip tying because I'm hoping that we'll have a good resist spot, 4 good resist spots on all of the yarn. Now with these resist spots, because the zip ties are so tight on the yarn, that's gonna limit the ability of our dye to hit those areas, which means that we should be able to get some areas without our dark maroonish color that we're creating. And, you know, I'm not paying super close attention to the placement. There will likely be some variation from batch to batch, but the goal is to have 4 zip ties on each 100 grams. And then you can see that I should be able to fit, especially if we have enough water, 400 grams of yarn into here. But let's quickly add the zip ties onto 200 grams more yarn. Now that we're here, I'm debating. I did consider layering the like brown and red on separately, but I don't think I want to do that. Maybe what we'll do is add the red and brown combination and then see where we are, and maybe add a little bit of brown like down here, just over it. But I have to think about how I want to set this up, because I want there to be plenty of water here, and I think I want things to be hot to start, but then I want to stir the areas. So I think that what I should do is, I mean, the reason why I'm hesitating is because I would love to use the same dye bath over and over and over again. And so that's why I'm like, okay, if I have everything hot, then I could add the yarn, the dye onto the yarn, but I need to do a big volume. But if I'm doing things that way, then the volume will keep increasing a lot, and so that'll give more variation batch to batch. It makes the most sense to set up the dye bath and then add the dye and then add the yarn, because I can keep the volume a little bit more consistent overall, even if I come in with more dye at some point. So let's go ahead and start thinking about this. I'm gonna add some water in here. 24 cups of water I just added in, and let's do acid by the 1/4 cup. So we're gonna add a 1/2 cup, or approximately 120 milliliters, which is about 8 tablespoons of white vinegar. And this is gonna be our starting dye bath. Now I'm not gonna add dye to it over here and then carry this over. So let's move this over to my stove and add dye. Okay, let's start with 200 milliliters of our red dye and 100 milliliters of our brown. And I'll see where this brings us, and we'll know how we may need to edit the color. I'm okay if things are a little bit browner than what I'm expecting, or what I initially proposed. Okay, so for reference, that is the red by itself, and now we are still very red. It's hard to say. Oh, well, let's heat it up and then we'll bring over our yarn, because we can always add more dye, but we can't take it away. So yeah, let's heat things up, and if things feel too red, then I can add more brown on one area to give it a little bit more dimension. It'll take a little while for this to heat up, so I'll be back when we're hot. Well, certainly things are warm. So we have a total of 3 grams of dye in here for 400 grams of yarn. And so far that isn't like way too much dye. But the nice thing about the water level that we have is that, I'm really glad I went with 24 cups of water, is that I can add all the yarn and there's plenty of space to move that color through. I probably should have put things in the other direction, because we may want to add some browns down there, but I think I'm pretty happy with this color. It could be a little bit more red, but we're gonna be adding some bright pops. The thing I don't know, and the thing that this batch that we may do differently, is if I'm gonna wanna add a lot more dye because maybe this color isn't saturated enough. But I think that what we're gonna do for now is I'm gonna set a timer for 15 minutes so we can let this color absorb. And then from there, we'll decide if we want to add more color, if I want to add a little bit of brown down there, or if I want to go the other direction and add a little bit more red. I don't know. Or if I want to add more of the same color at the same proportions. Not like double, but 2 parts red, 1 part brown. So we'll see, and I'll be back in 15 minutes. It's only been 3 minutes. And if I move it to the side, there is still some red in there, but most of the color is in our yarn. So we're not gonna get significantly deeper than this. Oh, this is so hard. I can't decide what I want to do. I'm gonna go brainstorm while we finish waiting that 15 minutes. Okay, I came up with a plan. We're gonna add more dye, but onto the yarn as it is. I took 50 milliliters of our brown and I added it to 250 milliliters of water, which I'm adding down here and sort of moving it through. It may spread more, may spread further, but localing sort of around that one zip tie. Okay, and here I am with 50 milliliters of red in 250 milliliters of water, adding it down there, and then bringing my spoon over nearly immediately to work that through at least a little bit. And so some of it may strike fast, some of it may not, but hopefully this will give us a little bit at least of dimension of those colors, whether or not they spread a ton or not. And so then we'll have lighter and deeper tones in here, which should be a little bit on the subtle side because we have this sort of burgundy color to start with. So now we have a total of 1% depth of shade of everything on here. I don't know if I should have pushed it more or not, but let's go ahead and wait 30 minutes and then we'll see where we are color-wise. One thing I do want to add now is that as time goes on, the acid concentration will shift because we're adding more volume. Yes, we're having a lot of evaporation happen as well. You can see how steamy we are. So that's just something to keep in mind because things could start behaving a little bit differently as time goes on. I mean, I think 500 milliliters of water is around like 2 cups. So proportionally adding that to what was closer to probably 25 cups total, that doesn't make a huge difference. But over time, if we're adding, 1.5 cups of liquid each time, that can start to add up. So we may add some more acid at various points as needed. But anyway, this is looking pretty. Okay, I guess we should peek first. Ooh, good, things are looking nice and clear. Okay, we're gonna remove the yarn. Now, as I do this, I'm gonna remind you that you should always wear some kind of protective eye gear. Oh, darn it. As a zip tie broke. You should always wear some kind of protective eye gear while dyeing yarn. But especially, it comes in handy with zip ties because sometimes the yarn is more flingable as like I snap it. So some zip ties get, I don't know, I had one batch that doesn't stand up to heat as well and is more prone to cracking. And I think especially some of these zip ties that I use over and over for resists are more prone to cracking as well. Now, the coloration in here in the reds has dimension. That brown we added is incredibly subtle, which is also what I wanted. And so that is really, really good. Now, the one thing I forgot to do was go ahead and add more zip ties onto our yarn That way we would be ready to go with the next batch. And so we're almost ready. Let's go ahead and just add a tablespoon of white vinegar, and I'll go get our dyes. And we can pour these dyes in for that next round. I am in a little danger of running out of the red, but I do have an older Oxblood dye stock that may come in handy. But let's go add some more resists onto yarn. I'm gonna add a full skein in with each subsequent mini skein bundle that we add here and carry on. Now, one thing I am worried about is running out of the Oxblood red, because I'm gonna be dyeing 4 batches of this colorway, and currently I'm using 250 milliliters of our red for each batch, and I made 1 liter of our dye stock. Normally, I like to make sure I have more dye stock prepared than I plan to use for the project. It happens that I have a tiny bit left of a dye stock from Oxblood red that I made a little bit ago, so I can use that in a pinch. So I think we should be fine. But I'm bringing this up because normally I try to mix way more dye than I think I might need for my project, just because then I don't hit a situation where I might run out. But given that these bottles are a liter, the biggest measuring tool I really have is for 1 liter. I suppose I have like 2-liter glass jars. It would be challenging for me to make a dye stock with more than 1 liter of liquid at one time with the tools I have at my disposal. So I don't think I would have been able to do anything differently. But anyway, my plan is to carry on and dye this yarn very similarly before we get ready to remove resists and have fun adding to our colorway. Now, we're gonna remove our resists here in a second, and we have this beautiful fall burgundy and brownish color. And I want some pops of brighter colors to go along with this. Leafy tones. I'm thinking yellow, which could be just straight yellow. I'm thinking maybe some kind of lime or yellow green, maybe more yellow green than just lime. I'm thinking a golden orange color and then a more orange color. And the way I thought we'd get these colors today is by mixing some of primary colors that I already have dye stocks made up for. We have Dharma acid dyes in brilliant yellow, Caribbean blue, and deep magenta. I don't want the colors to be extremely saturated, so we will be diluting our dyes with some water. So that way they're still sort of bright and clear, but not super loud. And I know that because I'm mixing these colors, we could end up with colors that break. But because we have that burgundy backdrop, if they break, they'll sort of break into those other colors that we're layering on top of anyway, and I think could give just a little more dimension. So I'm not worried about that. I've played around with all these colors in the past, so I had a good gut of where I wanted to take them. I ended up measuring 4 different colors as follows. For a yellow, I used 25 milliliters of yellow and 1 drop, just 1 drop of deep magenta. For the green, I used 25 milliliters of yellow and 2 milliliters of blue, which I probably could have done a lot less if I wanted the green to be a little more yellow, but I think I'm still happy with it. And then for 2 oranges, I did one with 20 milliliters yellow, 5 milliliters pink, and the other 15 milliliters yellow and 10 milliliters pink to have something that is a more red-orange. And I think these are the 4 leafy colors that I'm going to use on our resist points. But I need to clean the counter before we bring over the yarn. I diluted the around 25 milliliters of dye we had for each color with water to fill up these tulip one-step tie-dye bottles. And each of those bottles fits, I don't know exactly, over 130 but less than 150 milliliters. So to give you a feel for the dilution. But since I'm using a consistent container, I can mix more of these colors really easily if it's needed. And you can see that our colors break. We end up with a yellow halo actually on the paper towel in all the cases, which won't be a problem, again, because that will interact really nicely with the colors that we have on the yarn already. Now, funnily, this skein here may be the skein that I broke the zip tie on. And in fact, here's another one I see cracking. We're gonna just remove the zip ties. Now the zip ties I use for the resists are ones that have the most color, because I know we'll be covering them up, but ooh, we have a nice big section here. I feel like with the resist I did last Chanukah, well, I did a cold processing for that resist color. So I think that we were able to get more color within the yarn, but also the sections were smaller than I wanted. And so that's why we're going with a larger, that's why I did 2 zip ties on each section. Okay, and so this may have been the one where the zip tie fell off, but what I'm gonna wanna do now is open up our skein to expose our resist areas. And now we're gonna apply dye. So this is our more orange red, and so some of this color is gonna go on to the other areas, and don't worry, I'll move it. We wanna cover up the white. If some remains, it is okay, but the goal is to cover up the whites. Okay, see this orange is different, but still bright. We'll have green down here. Now, I have a feeling I will mess up the order of these colors at some point. And so there might be some variations, because you'll notice that with the placement we have a big section of red and a smaller section of red. Odds are that I'm gonna mess this up. But, I mean, we'll obviously try not to, but the odds are still in favor of a Rebecca oops. And so I don't know if this dye that I mixed up at the beginning is gonna be enough for everything, but it could be. It could be. Now the other thing I wanna do is bring some vinegar over onto these sections, because I have no idea with the resist areas if acid got in there or not. And I'm gonna sort of pat that through these areas. Rather than cleaning my hands off, I'm sort of patting it to the side. And so in here, there's some breaking and some yellow. I like that. I like that the color isn't perfect, but the goal is to try to cover up as much of the white as we can, which we did. So now I need to go put this in a steamer basket, which I'm going to attempt to do in a way that keeps these colors separate. And then I can wipe off the counter. I could use a yarn mop for this, but it's really not very much color, and we can start doing the next one. But let's go look at the steamer basket really quick. I haven't set a timer yet, but you can kind of see that I have it placed so that way the 4 colors are separate from one another, just to avoid transfer specifically onto our yellow. There could be some transfer from our red brown that we have already, but that's okay, we're prepared for that. And so I will be adding more yarn into the steamer basket, but we will end up steam setting this for 30 minutes. It has been 30 minutes, so we can now remove this yarn, and I'm gonna set it aside into an aluminum pan. It is very, very steamy. And even while it's cooling, I'm still attempting to keep the colors mostly separate. Just because, I mean, maybe I'm superstitious with those yellows, because I've had yellow transfer in the past. But I'm gonna set this aside to cool, and we're gonna bring in some more yarn so we can start steam setting, because this time I got our next round ready to go while the last one was steam setting. So I can pop this in directly, steam for 30 minutes. And then finally, once everything cools, we can go wash it. I tried to make a notation in my notebook about the order of colors with respect to the longer section, so I can aim for some consistency. But ultimately, because the samplers had a 10-gram mini skein, and you aren't gonna have two different bundles to try to work together, I mean, I guess maybe you could end up with 2 that are different, but there's differences between each resist bundle because of the placement. They're not all in exactly the same place anyway, so I think we're okay. But I carried on like I did for the first batch, adding the colors in approximately the right order, adding a little bit of acid on top just to make sure they can set well, and then popping them in a steamer basket to steam set for 30 minutes. And I do want to point out that despite how dark these zip ties are, I'm not observing any color transfer onto the yarn. Color transfer from zip ties can happen sometimes, and most often, maybe I've seen it with like a little bit of pink, green, or blue. The color tends to be fairly pastel. And so I knew going into this that there was a chance that that could happen, but I was prepared to then adjust the placement of the colors accordingly if needed. But again, so far I haven't seen any. On the 9th skein, I got one spot of transfer, and I can just have the green there. And I'll throw away that zip tie. Let's wash 400 grams of our Colorway. Look at those pops of color. I have to say, I really like the effects that I'm getting doing the resist first and then adding color after. I find that this gives me so much more control over the color placement. This is just some soapy water. And not only does it give me more control over the color placement, but knowing the background color a little bit first really helps plan the colorway. There was one time I did a resist colorway, and I think I ended up calling it Poison Apple. There was something about it that just didn't quite work. I had some bright colors, I added the resist, and I had another color on top. And I didn't really know how it was going to feel until the end. And so I think I ended up, did I ever end up over dyeing it or not? I wasn't sure. I did find a customer who fell in love with it, and it looked awesome knit up, I will say. But sometimes you just don't know how things are going to look. And so when I do this, I can look at this color next to these liquid colors I mixed. And I would have been able to decide, gee, okay, maybe the yellow is a little too bright. Maybe I'll add a tiny bit of pink to like make it a little more golden. Or, gee, maybe I want the green to be more blue. I can add more blue to it and make those decisions based on the color I already have here. But I'm in love with this, and I'm in love with the fact that we have no bleeding. That makes me so happy. But anyway, it's so funny because I had ideas of the colors that I was going to use here. Before then I looked and saw, gee, I have all these primary colors already in dye stocks. I may as well just mix exactly the colors I want. And I'm really glad I went that way because I think I may have picked more muted versus bright colors otherwise. And I love the contrast of our like burgundy with these fall pops of color. Oh, it makes me so happy. But anyway, I'm gonna go put this through my spin dryer to remove some more of the water, hang it up to dry, and well, I have a little bit of dye left. So let's go leave no dye behind. It's time to leave no dye behind. I have 200 grams of some of our 20 gram mini skeins here in this shoebox. And we're going to use up this leftover dye that I have been using on those resist points. Okay, I'm going to start off with a liter of water. I've not added any acid in here yet, and our yarn is dry. The goal of this is mostly to just wet our yarn. I am hoping to spread these colors out a bit, but we'll see how that goes. Okay. I would say this is interesting to know that 200 grams of dry yarn can soak up about 4 cups of water, which actually I suppose I knew because if I hand paint yarn, I never want to use more than like 2 cups of liquid. Okay, I'm going to put that cap on there. And I would say that the second batch of dye we have, these containers are about half full. So total, if each of them had, total we probably have around 50 grams of dye. All right, but there goes our yellow, which may disappear eventually, but you know, we will see. Oh, I think that's the darker one. There's a little bit of dye that's going to be left behind, but it is what it is. Yeah, I think we're going to lose our yellow. as we do this. Although the yellow also seems to be spreading along the bottom, which is kind of cool. You know, the yarn isn't doing one thing I thought it would do. It isn't like, I should have moved it as I went to sort of help float it up to accept these colors. So I have a feeling this might be quite orange. Okay, so what I want to do for the green then is, well, here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to add some acid on, because I want to try to maintain some of these colors that we have going on. And then the other thing I'm going to do is shift the yarn over, because there's no reason why, if things aren't going the way that you think, you can change the equation a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to bring the green over here. And yes, we may overtake a lot of those yellows. It may go over onto some of those reds, but is this not the prettiest fall colorway that you have ever seen? Even where it's blending, even where it may be sticking out. So I'm actually really, really happy with this. And besides adding that little bit more acid, don't want to touch it anymore. But what I am going to do is I'm going to leave it on the counter for about 30 minutes. I will pop a lid on it. But then I'll take it outside where I'll let it sit for 1 to 2 days. And then I'll steam set it for 30 minutes off camera, wash it off camera, but I'll show it to you with the finished dry yarn. I'm going to bring more of our bundles of mini skeins over, but right now I just wanted to show off one, because you can see just here how some of these resist points have moved relative to one another just from washing. So rather than feeling a little bit more like a line, you know, here they're even disconnected a little bit. And so this is one reason why it can be helpful to wait to remove the zip ties until right before you're going to dye it. Now, this is specific for mini skeins, because full skeins the yarn can shift a little bit, but it won't shift quite as much relative to each other. But yeah, I guess that's just one difference that was worth pointing out before I lay out more of our beautiful yarn. I suppose one other thing I can say right now is that I'm really glad that I did a combination of the red and brown overall, but then I added some more brown down here and some more red up here. Those differences in the background color are very subtle, very soft, but I think it adds like another layer of dimension, which goes well with some of these areas where, okay, the yellow is going over it, that's giving us some more orange over there, or maybe we get a little more brown around the green, just because of the way the colors layer and mix together. This is so pretty, and I'm so happy with it. At one point, I don't remember if I thought I was going to try to lay out 10 minis from one bundle to show how similar or different they are. Clearly, we have a lot of consistency here, but the distance between the various colors, the length of the long section or the shorter sections, that's going to vary, because I did not put things out in a way to make it easier to have that be reproducible. But I think that if you were going to do this and then had a bunch of mini skeins you're going to use in one project, which really you should just use a whole skein, you could get some more randomness added to your color progression. I'm going to need editing Rebecca's help here, because I think that I dyed our full skeins not all at the same time in the same pan. I think I had them divided up. And the coloration of the background color is a little bit different. Clearly you can see the browns struck here a little bit faster. We have a little bit more variation there, and I see more of the true reds at the top as well, which isn't a bad thing. It seems to me that the strolls are absorbing color slightly faster than the platinums. But other than that, the main difference between the full skeins and the mini skeins that you have on either side is just that the length of the skein here is going to make a huge difference. So our resist points are similar in size, whether we had mini skeins or full skeins, but proportionally there's more length of this that will be the background color on the full skeins. So, just wanted to point that out. Before I go and start twisting up minis, we have our Leave No Dye Behind skeins here. And we have a lot of cute blending of the colors, but they coordinate with the main colorways really, really well. I think that like the combination of the two is really fun, and you could get some really interesting stripes and patterns if you were to alternate skeins here. But anyway, I need to go set up my skein twister and start twisting minis. I have re-fallen in love with resist dyeing techniques, and I want to do it over and over and over again. Specifically, I think that adding the resist onto bare yarn to then remove and sort of reveal this coloring book of bare yarn that I can add color to is my favorite way to do this. I think it gives me so much more flexibility and choice. And also it's easier to add color to a small area and you can sort of adjust the contrast there as you go. Whereas if you dye the base layer first and then add resist and over dye it, you don't have as much control over the contrast. And once you remove the resists, then it could be hard to add color back where you want it again later. Could be, not impossible. But anyway, I really adore this mini from tonight, and I love that the way I have it twisted, you technically can find all of those little pops of color. Even though as it's twisted, you can't necessarily tell the order or the progression or the length of the color sections in between each color, you would need to untwist it in order to see that. And honestly, that's a huge reason why I don't like to reskein my yarn unless I have to, because I think being able to see the colorways as it was dyed can help you get an understanding of how potentially it could work up. I really hope that you're having fun with the Chanukah special this year. Believe it or not, I do not film the videos in the order that I present them. This was technically the 5th video that I filmed, but tonight is night 3. And the reason for this is that I try to order the colorways in a way that could make a little bit of sense, so it's a little bit less random. Even though the Chanukah series isn't intended as a fade set or anything, I try to have a color progression that, I don't know, makes a little bit of sense. At the end of the series, after the 8 Nights of Chanukah 2 bonus videos, on January 4th, there will be a behind the scenes vlog. And in part of that, you'll get to see me look at all the colors I dyed, rearrange them, and think about how I want to have things ordered for this year. Now, if you're loving the series, you obviously can go and buy some yarn in my shop's ChemKnits Creations. But if you want to support the channel, but don't need more yarn, I know, there are some ways you can do that. You can join to become a channel member and get some fun custom ChemKnits emotes, or you can go over to Patreon and join the ChemKnits Patreon. There are different rewards at different levels. Everyone gets early access to new content. And then at different levels, there's behind the scenes sneak peeks, permanent Etsy coupons, and more. However, you can even join the Patreon as a free member, so then you can get notified with any public posts, such as pre-orders for big ChemKnits events like the Chanukah special or the spring/summer mini skein mini series. It's the closest thing I have to an email list. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and what do you think will come up for night 4 of Chanukah? I love hearing your guesses and suggestions, especially in the final moments before I schedule tomorrow night's video. Thank you so much for watching.